Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am so delighted today to have such a musical and talented guest who has had an incredible journey in his creative endeavors, and it is Brandon Pak. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm very honored. So that's very sweet of you, Connie.
I am so excited for this conversation today because you are so genuine and authentic about your journey and the roads that it took to get to here where you are, which is so Christ-centered, so immersed in involving him in your music and your messages and what you do. And that has not always been the case. So let's go back and take you into that world that was so high performance and with all these names and
Sure.
in that music industry area. So let me read your bio first, and then we're going to jump right into that journey and where it began. Brandon Pak is a singer, songwriter, and Deseret book recording artist, and he is a graduate of Boston's Berkeley College of Music. Brandon also had the opportunity to perform with and for artists such as Andy Grammer, Charlie Puth, Justin Timberlake, Pentatonix, the Truman Brothers, the Bonner family, and featured in movies and soundtracks like Daddy's Home 2. He lives in Roosevelt, Utah with his beautiful wife, Katie, and his 17-month-old baby girl, Claire. Whether it's writing first dance songs for weddings or writing worship music, he loves helping people connect through music, and I would add connect to Christ. It's so beautiful. So let's go back to that. We won't go all the way back yet, but you're doing the stuff that's with high profile people. You're living the dream. I mean, by most people's standards for their musical career and the climb, and it's such a cutthroat industry, you've made it in a very real sense. Take us to what that life looked like for you.
Yeah. Kind of towards the end of high school and early college years, there was a number of formative experiences that I had. I think everybody kind of has that moment where they decide, what they want to study, what they want to go into. And I think for me, I had floated some other ideas, maybe being a teacher or something, but I felt like I had always had the pull to do music or something in entertainment, whether it be theater or just anything that had like a sense of artistry there. And so, I decided at the end of high school I was going to study music, but at the time, I was doing a lot of a cappella, which is really, really interesting. And so that was kind of my first glimpse into doing something that was, I think a legitimate commercial thing. I'd gone out for this summer camp thing called A Cappella Academy, and I'd been selected, and it was pretty hard to get into, and only a handful of people came in. I remember there it was hosted by Pentatonix, and I'm just starstruck, like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Getting to learn from them and sing with incredibly talented people. And this was happening during that like summer senior year or just before senior year. And so it's like really formative thinking about what you want to do. And so I decided after feeling this huge pull to go and decide to do music. And I went to Berkeley College of Music. I got to have a number of experiences, and most of the things happened because I decided to follow a cappella, which is really interesting. But I was in a collegiate a cappella group there, and we got to open for Pentatonix. We sang background for so many different people. At school through Berkeley, I got to sing and perform. When Justin Timberlake came back, it was like our senior showcase. I mean, I think in college, I was very busy. I was doing wedding singing. So I always kind of worked and done music at the same time. And so when I was going to school, I was wedding singing, trying to make ends meet and to be able to have a little bit of money to maybe go on dates and things. And so at the time when I would do that, it was fairly exhausting, but it was early days, late night sessions, recording, doing commercials and soundtracks and all the things. I feel like the whole day schedule was pretty intense and pretty taxing. But at the time, I think I was young enough to not worry about my sleep schedule. I was like, we can make it work, sessions from like 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. And I was like, why did I agree to do this, But it was a really special time too. It was really unique. And then I got to meet so many people who are, pretty dear to me at this point in my life, and people who I'm not involved with spiritually, anymore, but people who I really admire in a musical way. And I think, you're able to draw from so many influences you have in your life and then apply them in a spiritual sense when the time comes. But I think in spite of all these really cool things I was getting to do, and a lot of people would ask me, man, you must be living the life right now, super loving it. This was during a time of inactivity for me spiritually. When I was 16 or 17 years old, right before all this happened, I just felt like I was done. Like I didn't want to do anything spiritual anymore. I didn't want to go to church anymore. My parents are really amazing people. I think for all the concepts and principles that I think my dad tried to teach me in like an intellectual way, my mom really embodied in the way that she lives. And I remember it was tough for them, when I told them I didn't want to go to church anymore. I had so many questions. Naturally, I think being involved in entertainment, being involved in music and theater and all these different things, you meet a whole host of a lot of different people and a ton of different diversity, which I still think is a huge and beautiful strength. But at the same time, it makes you wrestle with a lot of gospel principles, because I think the gospel, that there is one God and he does have law and he does have commandments and he expects you to obey them, right? And for us to share, even to go out on a mission and to share these things, you have to truly believe that, there is some objectivity. Not that everybody has to live their life in the same way. That is not what that means, but that there is one Savior in Christ, right? And we're able to rely on him and love him. And so I didn't have that testimony at this time, and my dad would kind of nail into me and be like, Brandon, I know it's true. And I was like, that's great, right? But I don't have that experience that you have. And so it was really challenging for me to kind of wrestle with my dad, who's this Korean immigrant who really believes, he attributes so much of his life's success to it and his family to it, for then me to walk away from that. And so I remember after years of not going to church anymore, I'm at this point where I'm getting all these amazing things. My band, with all my original music, I've been asked to go on America's Got Talent. I was just like, dude, I am so unhappy. I just felt like all my relationships were so shallow. I didn't want to call home and tell them how sad I was, because my dad was like, well, if you're not going to do the one thing that I told you have to do, Brandon, if you're not going to go back to church, I don't know what else to tell you. And my mom's really, loving, and I usually call her when I want to avoid the subject, and she'll just kind of talk me through how I'm feeling. But yeah, it was a really difficult time, I think, for me to feel full in any way, because I know this now, but I was missing, the most pivotal relationship that there is to have, when I just felt like I was very transient. I didn't feel like I had any direction in the things and the dreams that I'd gotten and had been fulfilled. I just didn't feel fulfilled by them. I wasn't getting that sense of gratification. So I'm talking and rambling,
No,
but
no, you're not. I love this. And we feel like we're right there, because I think that's true of creatives in every industry. There's an image you have in your mind of, I'll know I've made it when, right? When you write a book,
yeah,
New York Times bestseller, right? I'll
yeah,
know that I've made it then. I remember reading an article about a gal and this guy who both released their books on the same day. They were releasing it nationally and it was like a big deal, and nothing. Like they were just sat there and they're like, there was nothing happening. It was such a letdown, because it was the reality, right? And
yeah.
I love that you're bringing up the reality that there are all of these pieces that go with the industry. And even when you make it or feel like you've made it, there's still these realities emotionally, spiritually, daily, that you still have to navigate and have to decide, is this meaningful? Is this nourishing my soul? Is this something I can sustain long term? And that's what I love that you bring up. Take us to that night that you're running down by the river, and you're really thinking, I need to shift, right? This isn't like, it's working on paper, but in my soul, it's not working. Take us to that catalyst moment.
There's a number of different feelings and emotions associated with that, but I mean, I think I was extremely tired and I didn't have the patience for a lot of things that I wish I had. I think a lot of people, wrestle with this, but I wrestle a lot with regrets and feeling like I've broken relationships, or that I've hurt people, all these different things. And it was hard for me to grasp, at the time. And on top of that, I just didn't feel like I had anyone to really lean on. I didn't really have a ton of positive outlets. Every time you do a show, or every time you're in the middle of preparing for one, there's like this high. You're like, oh, I'm involved in this. I'm doing this big thing. But when everything gets quiet at the end of the night, when you don't have a show, when you don't have a session, when you're just like sitting fidgeting in your room and you don't know what to do, I felt like I needed to get out, because I was just afraid of being alone with myself. When I sat alone with myself for too long in this like dingy Boston apartment that I was living in for the sake of doing music and going to school and everything. And so I went out for a run, as I often did in Boston, and I'd run, some 5 to 7 miles. It was really crazy, but I'd run from my apartment, kind of deeper into the city, out into the river, and then run the length of it. When I remember just being so emotionally tired, and then having that transfer as well to being physically tired at the end of it. And I'm running along it, and I'm just like, this can't be all that there is. And before I had gone for that run, I always worry that when I communicate this story, that people are like, his parents weren't there for him. And I was like, no, no, no. My parents were there for me. But I think everybody, has that moment where they're like, I don't have anybody in my life that I want to turn to right now for whatever weird, toxic type of mental thing they're going through. And so I felt like I just needed someone to talk to that was kind of unbiased. They didn't know who I was. They could just be there for me to just like vent to them, similar to like, I think, counseling or therapy or something. And so I go and I called it the suicide hotline, because I was just feeling so down and so depressed. And the first thing they ask is like, are you in immediate danger? And I was like, no, like I'm not. I'm not planning on doing anything right now, but at the same time, like, I just feel so worthless. And I just felt so frustrated. It was like this weird self-pitying, but also kind of like paralyzing thing where I was like, I just don't know what to do anymore, you know? And so I hung up with that phone call. And so I go and I'm on this run, and I just kind of have this moment of clarity where I'm like, dude, this is not sustainable. Like living in this way already is gonna like take years off my life for how little sleep that I'm getting and how every moment is just so tense. There's just no relaxing conversation that I have, no downtime for me. I just feel so intoxicated in a bad and good way in terms of music. Like for all the good things that are happening, it's awesome. I'm super busy, but I'm so busy that I'm not allowing
You're not
myself
living.
to recover, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You're just pinballing and not recovering and not assimilating and becoming. It's just smack, smack, smack.
Yeah, no, and it was. And so I kind of made a decision that I was going to go, and I had gigs every single weekend. And so I decided I'll attend the earliest one on a Sunday so that it doesn't conflict if I had a wedding or something. And I can't remember if I had one that night or not, but I decided that I was going to go, that weekend. I didn't tell my parents. I don't want to get their hopes up, get them all excited. Oh, maybe he's coming back. And so I decided to go, and it's a weird feeling showing up, and some of like I think the culture and the tacit code rules of being a part of a congregation kind of fall away. And I went as me, and I don't have anybody that I'm like walking hand in hand with or somebody to sit in the booth with. Like I'm just a loner. And so I show up, and it happens to be a YSA ward, and it's a YSA ward that's like the age group above the YSA group that I pertain to. I think I went when I was like 22 or something, and this one was like 26 to 31, 32-ish, right? And so I go and I decide to attend, and it was a pretty amazing experience, even despite like the natural discomfort I think that comes from sitting amongst strangers. The actual atmosphere of it and the spirit felt so familiar. And I remember as I sat through that meeting, I just felt so much relief, and I felt like just this influx of light. And it was really special. And I mean, it's a very unique feeling. I don't say these physical sensations to say that that's what people should be looking for, because everybody is spoken to by the spirit in such a different way. But I remember at the end of that, I was like, okay, for some reason, I am not feeling crippled by, my anxiety or all these different things right now. I'm just here and I'm present and I feel clear, and it's really wonderful. And so I decided, okay, well, if it's true, if this is legit, because it's not like attending one sacrament meeting means like, oh, well, now I'm a constituent of this population. I get it. I'm 100% in. I said, well, I'm going to spend 3 months then and really trying to learn as much as I can. And everything I learn, I'm going to implement. I'm going to really live the way that they say to live, and I'm going to, obey the word of wisdom, give up all these different things. And throughout that 3-month transformation, it was pretty amazing. Some of the changes that occurred in me and my emotional health and my spiritual health and my physical health. I just watched myself slowly start taking care of myself more and more. And at the end of that 3 months, I knew that I was happier than I had been in my entire college life. It was really amazing. But, and I was sad because it was right at the end of my junior year, start of my senior year was kind of when that was happening. But I knew that, like, okay, well, I'm bummed a little bit that I didn't have this earlier, but I'm also really grateful. And so I decided at the end of that, I knew that I needed to serve a mission. And I love that I got to know the Savior more. I got to know who Heavenly Father was, and I felt their love for me. And I felt, the relief that my dad so many times said, you got to go to church, son. I'm like, okay. Turns out he was right. But it was really a really amazing transformative experience. I met my wife in that congregation, who's a couple years older than me. I never would have met had I not attended that. I mean, so many things. I feel like the stars aligned in that way. And maybe I needed to struggle to the point where specifically at that time I'd come back, because now so much of my life is now a result, and many of the blessings that, if not all the blessings, are a result of that, one pivotal decision to come back and then stick with that decision day by day to try and become more converted.
Amazing. And I think you were about 23 at the time you went on your mission. And then that's when America's Got Talent contacted you. Is that right? When you were thinking about going on your mission?
Yeah, right at the end of my senior year. It's interesting. I'm in these songwriting classes. I think one of the songwriters for Jesse McCartney was like in our class, and he was talking to us. And I remember I was sitting next to my guys, and I was like behind this pillar, and I was like reading my quad in class. And they're like, "What are you doing?" They're like, "Look who's here, dude." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know." I felt like I had this loss of love and infatuation for music and what it was doing for me, and this overwhelming desire to serve and grow in ways that were non-musical. And the way I interpreted that in the moment was God is telling me I've been on the wrong path. When I started that wrong path, I started devoting myself to music, which must mean that I'm not meant to do music, you know? That was kind of the way that I computed. I was like, so well, at the end of this, I'm giving it all up anyway, you know? So like, why do I care? So I'm going to keep my grades up. I'm going to do as well as I can, but I continued to do all the shows that I had booked for myself my senior year. And I wrote some in my sets and stuff when I'd perform. I started putting more of my emotional, spiritual music into it. So if I had like 12 songs or something, 2 or 3 of the 12 would become spiritual songs. And it was just this natural like flipping of some of my priorities and everything. So yeah, at the end of that senior year, they have like ensemble classes at Berkeley. And one of the options they have is for you to have your own ensemble if you want to do your own music, if you write, right? So I pulled all my guys together and we came together, and it's one of the most spiritually fulfilling, if not the best band experience I've ever had. But at the end of that, we had our big showcase and we did all my songs, and they had someone from America's Got Talent come out to see me, and they said, hey, like, we would love to have you on the show. Like, here's the details I need from you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, how long would you need me? And I think they needed me till like September-ish for filming or something, right? I hadn't gotten my call yet. I just knew that I put in my papers and I told them I could leave by May. And so I'm saying no to America's Got Talent on the off chance that I'm not available to serve yet. And so that was weird because like I wasn't even conflicted about it. In a previous life, maybe I would have been like, no way, are you kidding me, dude? But in this one, I was like, no, like it wasn't even hard. I was like, I'm sorry. I will not be able to accommodate that timeline. When I'm back, if our band comes back together, I will let you know. You know, and we didn't end up coming back together. But yeah, I just kind of said no and then served my mission.
That is incredible. I mean, look at that transformation, especially as a creative, when you have these goals and you think that's going to be the path. And I
Yeah.
love the awareness that you had that you personally lumped it together with music. And I remember you came back from your mission and you go to get your MBA, working in the healthcare field, and probably thinking, I don't know if I'm going to do music again at all, right? But then to come to this place where you're now doing music in a way that feels and sounds like it's so much more full, like a fullness of who you are and the message that you want to share. Take us to coming back and coming to your music to where it is now. How did you find your way to be able to get to this
Yeah.
place where you feel like I'm doing both like I meant to do?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. When I left, I was leaving behind music. I'm up for whatever. Maybe I'll meet someone who's like, you should go into this. You know, I was completely open book again. And I was like 23 and I was like, I guess I'm restarting. And so I go out, and my first mission president, Hammond, he's fantastic. And he was really engaged in the work. But I remember at the time it wasn't very music friendly. And so in the beginning, I kind of made a deal where I was like, well, I can play the guitar and play a spiritual song every time that someone comes to the waters of baptism. I can play a special number at their baptism or something, right? And then midway through, COVID hits and we get a new mission president, and he's like, why does this man not have a guitar? And so now every zone I go to, I get a guitar and I start putting videos out, right? And I'm one of the people that's actually featured in President Uchtdorf's message when he talks about, you know, the transformation of digital missionary service and everything. And it was pretty amazing. And I'm out on the streets with my guitar and I'm, you know, asking, hey, do you mind if I play you, you know, a spiritual song, which is way different than a contact that's like, hey, would you like to hear a message about the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ? You know, and so they'll listen to the song and the spirit is brought. And then from there, I'm like, would you mind? And if you don't have time right now, that's fine. But would you mind if I was able to come back and share with you a message? And 90% of the time they said yes, right? Maybe 90 is a little high, but it was a very high amount, right? And so
Okay.
it's this weird thing where like the spiritual music that I wrote at that time that was super a big piece of my conversion, I was able to share with both the members that I was able to serve as well as the people that I was able to teach. And I slowly started to feel kind of a sense of fulfillment from performance. And it's not in front of thousands of people, you know, it's just in somebody's living room. And their son or daughter left. They didn't want to hear our message. I start playing my song and they come back in. Really very special spiritual experience that I really cherish, that are very special to me, but nobody knows about. It's not anything's published, not anything I'm getting paid to do. But I remember experiencing this thing where now music is now this spiritual vehicle. And so the last half of my mission, I'm playing a lot. When I'm playing for people, for other missionaries, I'm playing in all these different atmospheres, putting out videos during this big digital time. And so then I come back from my mission after really feeling like, okay, well, at least maybe I went to college and learned to write music just so that the music that I made would be able to be of use to someone during that 2 year period. And maybe now it's done. And so then I come back, and the girl that I was dating prior to my mission, who's now my wife, a week after I came back, she called me. She's like, "Are you not going to date me?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, you're right, you're right, you're right." And so I go out and I live with my mother-in-law in Utah for a couple of months, and I date my wife. And before I move, I say, well, like, I want to know if some of my wedding band buddies have anything for me out here. And so I ask, and there was a band that was looking for a male vocalist. I come out and I get a job in healthcare parallel to my job in music, and I have both set when I move out here. So then I'm doing wedding singing again, what I did all throughout college, right? And it's a pretty amazing experience. I love my band, Metro Music Club. They're fantastic, and everybody there is just awesome. And I'm able to write first dance songs for a lot of my friends who are getting married now. And then I'm also, earning my MBA, getting promotions within my company. And now I kind of do both hand in hand. But even up till that point, I still wasn't like an artist. I was doing music, one, because, it helps us supplemental income and everything. But in my brain, my priorities were just making sure that I was, maintaining my covenants, getting married, starting a family and everything. And then through my work in Metro Music Club, one of the guitar players in my band, he was connected to the church music industry, and he had raised my name to one of the representatives from Deseret Book as a label, and they came out and met me, and they asked to hear some of my music, and I played it for them. And the title track on the EP that was just released a month or two ago, Worth Saving, was what I played for them, and the rest is history. I think they felt the spirit, and Bart is his name. Bart's pretty amazing and fantastic, but I'm grateful to him for taking a chance on me, so kudos to you. I appreciate you, Bart. Thank you. But he threw me a bone there and let me try, and ever since I've been writing music for Deseret Book. And I don't know that I ever thought that the music that I wrote to get me through my spiritual difficulties and kind of sustain me through my journey, I didn't know if that would ever end up being something that's published for other people to hear. But I'm grateful that it is. And it's wrapped around to a place where I didn't know that I would ever be. I definitely didn't think I was ever going to be a worship artist. I'll tell you that right now. I didn't think I was ever going to be primarily releasing music that is praise music, but I'm really grateful, and it's been such an amazing outlet, and it's been a blessing to my wife. It's been a blessing out here in Roosevelt. We have an addiction recovery center that's faith-based out here, and it's called Thompson House of Hope, and performing for them is a really special experience. Just recently, I went back to Colorado in the Arapahoe Stake out there near Denver, and that was where I'd spent a number of years making a lot of mistakes that led up to my inactivity. And I remember feeling really conflicted about whether or not I wanted to do a show there, because I felt like I was going to come back and they were going to be like, "You, Brandon, I remember you, you rotten little kid." But I remember speaking with, so he was my young men's leader, and then he became the bishop, and then he became a member of the stake presidency, and he was the one that had invited me. And he was like, "You need to let all that go, because everyone here is extremely excited to see you." And that was a really redemptive moment for me. That's actually really recent. It's just being able to go back to a place that I associate with a lot of spiritual pain that I caused others. That, you always worry, like, was I the reason this person went inactive? Was either because of my rebelliousness or my questions during class or my inability to be satisfied with a spiritual testimony that was really powerful at the time? I just worry that I negatively affected or impacted people. And I'm really grateful that I was able to go and provide spiritual light or bring people closer to Christ after a long period of feeling like I made people question their faith more than dive into it?
This is so gorgeous. Like, that bookend is incredible. To go back to that space. Most of us don't get that opportunity. I'm so grateful that you took it, and that it was so healing for on both sides, I'm sure. How fantastic is that? Watching you and this music journey, I think it's so great for listeners to be able to recognize that our creative journey is really impacting other people in that way, that spiritual level, whether we intend it to or not. That
Yeah.
it has the power to heal, it has the power to connect, it has the power to change our story and our narrative. And you've just showed that so beautifully. I wish we had so much more time to talk, because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
so much good stuff here. As
Yeah.
we wrap up here just a little bit, I would love to know, as you've done this journey, you met your wife and she waited for you on your mission, which was so cute. How did she go with that journey with you? Was she someone that saw you make that transformation, or was she right in the middle of it?
Oh,
How did this impact her and you two together?
thank you. Thank you for asking me this question, because so many times I feel like I get to talk about me and talk about my baby, but I don't get to talk about how much I love my incredible wife very often. But it's interesting. She had introduced herself to me when I first came back to church, and she was aware of me, but not in like we were super deeply connected by any means. And there's actually a really interesting story. I'd gone to church one Sunday, and this man whose child was hoping to go to Berkeley came to our sacrament meeting and kind of pinned me down and was like, hey, like I would love for you to give me a tour of the campus, help me to understand what the experience has been like. I was like, 100%, dude, absolutely, I'd love to do that for you. And so then as I'm going through second hour and I'm sitting next to him, I start to get this weird feeling that's like, don't go. And I was like, this dude seems super trustworthy. Plus, I could probably take him. Like, I'm not really worried about getting mugged or anything, you know? And we're going out and we're walking towards this car, and he's like, okay, I'm just over here. And I was like, I don't feel like I should go, and I'm really sorry. And he's like, okay. And I could tell there was a little bit of disappointment there. And very uncomfortable for me. I'm like, I promised you I'd do something. I was like, this doesn't seem right. But I go and I walk back in, and the first person that I see is Katie. And she's standing there. She says, do you want to walk me home? And I was like, yes, I do. And we walked 2, 3 miles for 45 minutes to an hour across town back to her campus. And along that way, we get the chance to share so much about ourselves. And I love talking about her because I think she's one of the people who I feel like really did things right. She's someone who I view as very just. And especially even going on a mission, how do I compare some person who's serving super late in the field, who's made so many mistakes, against somebody who has done things the right way? I think there's a spiritual power in both. Right. And I loved all my companions and the chance that I had to do that. But also, you know, in a much larger capacity, the companion that you choose for yourself, I think Katie had a lot of like check boxes that she imagined what her spouse would be like. And a lot of them, I bet you didn't include like 6 years of inactivity and a musician, you know, and all this stuff. She said that she's really grateful for the transparency that I shared into some of the addictions that I was struggling with, all these different things that I had chose to let go of through my journey. And I'm just really grateful that she was willing to see me for who I am in the moment rather than who I used to be. And I think there's a spiritual confirmation that's required at that point, because there's a huge distrust, I think, that can result from knowing that somebody has experience with certain things and not knowing whether or not you want to take a chance on that, because it's the biggest decision that you'll ever make as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, your eternal companion is everything. And she received confirmations through going to the temple with me. She was there when I got my endowment. Once we connected, I mean, we were like inseparable for like 9 months. It was crazy, leading all the way up to that. But in the beginning, even though we'd hang out a lot, she kind of fought dating me. She's like, dude, I can't wait 2 years for this. But I'm really grateful. But she really was such an example. She's the first example that I ever had in my life of someone who prayed and read every day, right? Just as like a habit, right? As a ritual. And we'd go on a date or something like that, and I'd be, you know, in her apartment or something like that. And then before she went to bed, she would pray, she would read her scriptures, and then I would leave. But witnessing that was really special. And even today, I feel like she's just a better parent than me, a better spouse. There's a lot for me to learn from her and glean each day. And if she was here, she would be interrupting me nonstop, being like, that's not true, don't say that. But for me, I mean, she really is just absolutely incredible. And I think she's a spiritual giant and someone who has helped me learn what it means to be a disciple of Christ. And because of her influence, I think that I've become a better one because of her, for sure. So
That's gorgeous. And I think about how this has influenced, so woven into your life, that music that you're doing now,
yeah.
right? All of the components, all the learning that you've done over the years has now amalgamated for you to be able to have this spiritual focus that is so fulfilling. And the very thing that you could not feel before with the bling and all of that, you know, superficial kind of thing, even though there were good elements there, and taking the best of that and then putting it with this driver, this spiritual driver, and with your messages that are bringing people to Christ. It's so amazing. And her love and support, and now this beautiful family, and you got the things, you've got it where you want it, and it's just going to keep flourishing. As we end here, just for those creatives that are listening and saying, man, I'm in the trenches still, or I'm just at this, I don't know what I'm doing place. Do you have any piece of advice for continuing to keep focusing on moving forward and focusing on him? Because you've had opportunities where you've been in those trenches where you've been like, it could go so many different ways right now. Is there any piece of advice that you could give them to say, stay focused on him, make sure that that's your driver?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the mottos that I live by in my life is Heavenly Father knows what's going to make me happy and fulfilled so much better than I do. And I feel like I experienced that firsthand. I think there's a weird thing in the church where it's like self-reliance is such a big thing, right? Like don't come to me for guidance until you've already written out your plan, right? There's all these Doctrine and Covenants scriptures that are like, it took no thought but to ask me or something, right? And so in my brain, I'm like, I need to push and push and push and make sure that I've decided my goal and go 100% towards that, and then God will make it happen, right? But in my experience, as I've pushed and pushed and pushed towards goals, I didn't take the time to continually evaluate and offer them up to the Lord to make sure that it's still what He wanted for me. And because of that, I feel like I spent all this time and energy moving towards a goal that wasn't in the direction of where I would end up. I try to do an analysis of, okay, what's going to help me maintain my priorities, God, family, career, all these different things. And I put them all in a little box and I say, all right, I'm going to go with this. But I did not anticipate that this is how my life would be. I never thought that this is the way that it would go. And it was giving up the dream and letting go of what I thought was going to fulfill me that has made me the most happy. And the years of discomfort and the brief period of time after deciding to kind of let go and take a leap of faith, it didn't feel like I was giving up a lot. In the moment, as you're giving it up, it does. But then as you start to get closer to the Savior and our Heavenly Father, it starts to fill your life in a different way, and you can start to feel the wheels turning and move forward in a different way creatively. And I think every time that I've checked in and I've offered up a goal since to Heavenly Father, my prayers are less of help me make this happen. Please, I want this so bad. And it just turns into, this is what I'm planning on doing. This is the set list that I have for tonight. This is what I'm planning on talking about, when I bear my testimony or whatever. Let me know what you think. And if you want something different, that's fine. And I do that all the way up until I sing the song. I can't tell you how many times I've prepped a set list and then I get in front of the mic and I'm like, why would you do that song? Do a different song. And I change immediately, right? But always being open to the Spirit's guidance and never being so focused on what you think the Lord wants you to say that you're not hearing what He has for you that day in that moment. Just always being open to whatever He might have for you, because He has the long-term in perspective and you can only plan. But if the goal is truly to glorify Him and get closer and become happier as a person, all these different goals, then you have to trust that the all-knowing and all-loving is going to set that in motion for you, and you just have to walk the path as you move forward.
Gorgeous. So beautifully said, Brandon. Honestly, I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen and write these things down. I love how you shared that. It is a trust exercise, and continually. I love how you talk about just continually taking it to Him and just adjust, be open to adjusting. That's so fabulous. And not just going with our mortal plan. This is beautiful. Thank you for all the wisdom and the authenticity and the things that you've shared. This journey is just so inspiring. People are going to want to connect with you. What's the best and easiest way for them to do that?
First, thank you. You're very nice. Very, very, very sweet. I don't know that I have wisdom or any of those things, but that's very nice of you. In terms of connecting with me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, just Brandon Pak Music is what you can search there and find me there. And I please do message me and reach out. Some of the most cherished memories I have thus far of doing things with music is people messaging me and being able to talk about the influence or the feelings they've had that are associated with my music and how that strengthened them. And I'm really grateful for that. But I think, yeah, that's great. Otherwise, listen to the music that's out. My EP is out, and I think much better spoken than anything I can say off the cuff, as some of the things that I've really prayed over and asked for the Spirit to be present during my music. And it kind of encapsulates a lot of different periods along my faith journey. And if you're able to relate to any of those, I hope that they're able to invite the Spirit into your life and help you turn to Him and maybe put into words some of the emotions that you've been struggling with, because it took me years and years to be able to identify and understand and compute them for me.
So gorgeous, so beautiful. I know, gotta stop saying that word, but it just that it is. It's just so satisfying. It's just wrapped up with a bow. Oh, it's so good. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Connie. I really appreciate you.
Same here. Oh my gosh. And for those that are listening, if you have enjoyed this interview, how could you not? Check out the other interviews that we have. As always, Lisa Valentine Clark, Ava Weitzman, people in education, people in humor, people in music and film and business that have all gone on their creative journey, trying to do their best to share their messages effectively and being an instrument in His hands. And you can continue to do the same thing, and you can get that inspiration for you on your journey of being called to create.